Okay, if you've been listening to my videos, you've probably gotten my vibe that sometimes I'll just like call people up, right? Be like, hey, I want to come and visit, right? I tell people all the time, never say the words to me, hey, if you ever want to come visit, you know, and they live in some fabulous location, watch out, because I'll just show up. So at this point, I've, done the U.S. pearl farm, I've done the Chinese pearl farm, and I'm like, what about the Philippines? And the Philippines is great because, once again, like, there are so many islands in the Philippines, they're just like, it is a huge place and a large place to navigate. So, going to the Philippines, and this time I didn't just take my right-hand woman, my mom, I took my right-hand man, my dad. They were like, where are you taking us? Because it required plane, Jeep, boat. And it was literally like a little fishing boat style, like a little John boat across the ocean to get to this island, which is not even where the pearl farm was. That was just where we were staying, to then take another little boat. But what mind-blowing, I told y'all about how Mikimoto, way back when, and I'm talking, he cultured his first pearl in 1895, so I'm talking like years ago. And as he perfected his culture of pearl production and realized if he could do this in fresh water, how much more affordable that would be. Well, let me tell you, the remote place that I went in the Philippines, where they have a full-on 300 staff personnel on an island. Because what they're doing there, so there are two different ways there's probably like a million different ways to run your cultured pearl production. And as I've been to various places, it fascinates me how this production will do it slightly different than another. But, you have an option to, do a wild collection of oysters, which you then nucleate, put the little bead in, put the little tissue in, to encourage the oyster to make a pearl, right? So you can collect a wild stock, or you can breed oysters. And if you choose to breed oysters, you got 2 years of growing those baby oysters. And they're not like, it's a multi-step process, because you've got to imagine the breeding process requires the release and then basically the fertilization of these baby oysters happens in the water, and then those little things have to be collected and then grown from there. So it's like it all happens in these tanks. You might put 2 oysters in there that aren't encouraged to release their sperm or release the eggs, that kind of thing. There's a lot that goes into it, and that's what they were doing in the Philippines. So they were basically breeding their own oysters. They were like producing their own, they're still doing it now, their own plankton to feed the oysters. So oysters are filter feeders, so they suck in and out water all the time, which is really cool because they're very good for water quality because they are filter feeders. They are filters, right? This also means they get all their feeding and their nutrients from the water, and this also means they need healthy, clean water to survive. So here we are in the Philippines, which is such a large, vast, island-based country that people have different practices and different experiences on like hygiene and cleanliness and water quality. So, in the Philippines, it then becomes, if this pearl farm wants to survive, they have to like educate the local people about like keeping the water clean, how to properly dispose of waste. They also like have their own scientific processes of like creating, breeding or however like the balance of the plankton in the water that they're putting in the water for these oysters. And, you know, they also do things like they attempt, when an oyster produces a really good pearl or has a particularly great nacre quality of their shell, they try to have those oysters be the one to breed, right? So they want those to be the mamas and daddies of the baby oysters that they are then growing. So huge production. So what happens next? So they are, you know, breeding these oysters. They're growing up to 2 years. What happens next?